Okay, welcome everyone to our free webinar session presented by DynamicPoint and sponsored by Sabre Limited. I'm excited to introduce today's topic, which is managing employee reimbursement and corporate credit cards using Office 365. I'm Crystal Aubin from Micro-Age Kitchener, Sabre Limited's sister company. I'm here to introduce your expert presenter, Mike Marson, Director of Business Development for DynamicPoint. Sabre Limited is an expert in Microsoft Dynamics Business Central ERP implementation and training for manufacturing industry. DynamicPoint are experts in delivering business apps that provide the greatest level of functionality and flexibility through the utilization of the Office 365 framework. We estimate that today's webinar will take about 45 minutes of your time. All of our webinars are recorded and loaded to YouTube. Be sure to go to Sabre Limited YouTube channel to check out more videos and subscribe to our channel so that you receive the notifications when our new content is added. Or you can check the chat window on this webinar for the direct link to subscribe. I will post it shortly for you. To ensure that the best quality, everyone will be on listen only mode, but if you do have any questions or comments, please go ahead and submit those by clicking on the chat icon and then by typing your question in the pop-up chat pane, and we'll answer your questions at the end of the session. And now I'd like to hand it over to Mike from DynamicPoint to begin your webinar.
Thank you so much, Crystal, for the introduction, as well as thank you for everyone's time. I greatly appreciate it. As Crystal mentioned, I usually talk for about a half an hour, so not too much, and then we'll save some time for question and answers at the end. Today's topic, again, automating employee expenses with Office 365. Full disclosure, we do have a product that we're adding to this mix, but I will also, just focus on some Office 365 technology that you could use with or without our product. So if nothing else, hopefully it'll be educational on sort of what the options are and how you could use this framework to automate a lot of business processes. But obviously today we're focused on the employee expense management aspect. So no further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Just a quick introduction to DynamicPoint, just talking about who we are here. So DynamicPoint, again, our charter in life, if you will, or who we are, is we create apps on top of the Office 365 framework. And for those who are not familiar with Office 365, obviously it comes with sort of the apps that we're all accustomed to, like Outlook and Word and PowerPoint and whatever else, but there's a whole architecture for creating programs and automating business processes using some of the more advanced features that are included with the subscription. So generally speaking, the things that I show you today are included with everyone's subscription. We're not, selling more licenses, or you're not having to buy additional licenses from Microsoft. It usually comes with most all of the enterprise licensing. We've been around since 2009. For those of you who remember back then, Office 365 did not exist. So we grew up creating applications on top of .NET, and then we did SharePoint on-premise solutions back in the day. And now all of our apps, of course, have been moved to the Office 365 framework. So everything I'm showing you is latest and greatest technology. None of it is, been around for 20 years or archaic or anything like that. It's all the latest and greatest. We have several products that we've developed over the years. We have a portal product, we have an AP automation. We are going to absolutely ignore those today, and we're going to focus on this guy right here. And the goal of what today's session is about is looking at Office 365 and how I could use it to capture employee expenses, perform workflow, do accounting integration, such things as coding to GL accounts or dimensions, depending on your ERP system, and then ultimately reflecting whatever the outcome of these transactions in an ERP product. So that's one thing to be said about all of our products, is they all are extensions of an ERP. We are not trying to replace that functionality or take over any of the system of record from the ERP perspective. So that'll be the scope of our call today. So Office 365, obviously a little cliche-ish at this point as far as what that means, but I want to give a little bit of context to the products that we use in conjunction with our demo today of what we're leveraging to automate employee expenses. And for those who aren't familiar with this concept, I'd like to draw the analogy. It's very similar as like adding an app to your mobile phone, which I'm sure we've all done in our life. And when I add an app to my mobile phone, it asks me questions, right? Can I use your camera? Can I use your location? Can I use notifications? And all of those, of course, are the app developer leveraging this ecosystem that is provided by the framework of either iPhone, Android, whatever your flavor. But of course, we're not doing that today. We're leveraging another framework that's provided by Microsoft. So they provide a whole ecosystem. And generally speaking, the way that works, we have our apps, those get added to SharePoint. So I could add apps to SharePoint. And SharePoint is basically serving as our foundation for this business process. It's where the data is stored. It's providing the security. It's the user interface. We're going to be managing employee receipts and things like that. So you could think of it as really the framework or the foundation for what we're doing today. It's the home of where everything sort of goes back to. For workflow, Microsoft gives us this other tool by the name of Power Automate. It is very much the Swiss Army knife of workflow tools. It has connectors to different systems. I could obviously do approvals and reviews and things like that through that framework, and we'll be showcasing some of that today. Power Apps, employee expenses especially, a lot of people don't want to do that from a computer or a web browser, and they want to do it from a mobile phone. So we'll be showcasing different Power Apps that we've created over the years and just giving you some ideas of how I could use these tools to automate things like corporate credit cards or expense capture or coding, etc. Forms sometimes comes into play. If I want to also just gather data, Forms, if you're familiar with it, it's a little bit more simplistic than the Power Automate interface, but it could also be used for submission of expenses and caption receipts. And then last but not least, Power BI, all of the data that we will be creating today from employee expenses. If I want to do any analysis in it, it is all within the Power BI framework. And that is, of course, Microsoft's go-to solution for connecting to that, SharePoint sources and things like that, and performing analysis on all of the information that is, of course, captured as I'm automating employee expense receipts. So let's look at the process that we want to talk about today. Generally speaking, it's 3 steps, right? And the first one is this guy over here, and that I need to capture an expense. And capturing an expense could come in different flavors. It could be a credit card expense that's maybe coming in from a feed from a credit card company. It could be taking a picture from a mobile app. It could be doing a simple upload of a receipt such that OCR takes it from there. I could give my users a portal. However I want to capture that information, it is ultimately going to be stored in this library. So you could think of this library as sort of the end goal of where all of this data will be coming in. And obviously the benefit here, as opposed to people submitting, reimbursement forms using Excel templates or Word templates or whatever else, is I now have it in a central repository. And with that central repository, I could start collecting this data and having a single source of where all this information resides. So caption receipts, of course, is number 1. Number 2, after I get that, I need to process it. And what does that mean? Well, it really depends, right? If I'm concerned with mileage or credit cards, then that's most certainly a different type of processing than trying to do out-of-pocket reimbursement where I actually have to pay my employee. But again, we'll show you some different examples and hopefully give you something to get the wheels turning there on the different options that are available. This second step is also where we're going to do workflow. Anytime we talk about employee expenses, workflow is usually very important, right? I need to get the appropriate approvals for these expenses. Maybe I need to submit them to my manager or cost center manager, such that they could, obviously be aware of what's going on and review and approve it. And then the third and final step here is bringing this information into the accounting system. Depending on the type of expense it is, that'll represent a different transaction. Maybe I want to create a payable because I'm paying my employees directly from the ERP. Or maybe I'm paying them from a payroll system and I don't want to do that. I just want to have those transactions reflected on the general ledger. So there's very much different options, even when it comes to the accounting integration of employee expenses. So with no further ado, enough PowerPoint, let's start looking at functionality that we could do, again, using Office 365. So let me get out of this PowerPoint session here and open up my expense site. So what I've created here is a SharePoint site. to manage employee expenses. We're giving them a web-based dashboard here. If you're not interested in a web-based dashboard, if people aren't working, from home and they're more mobile, just be patient and I'll show you some of the options there. But maybe I want to manage my expenses directly from a web portal. So this is really nothing more than a SharePoint site. The only quote unquote magic about it or something special is I've added an app. And you can see I have our DynamicPoint expense app that I've added to this site. It's pretty simple. You could add an app, and I've added that to this site. It's going to give me more functionality when it comes to the processing and coding of these employee expenses. But we'll hold off on that for now. And we are going to talk about, we're going to start simple, and we're just going to talk about the ability to create an expense report directly on this SharePoint site using our EasyEXP365 app. So pretty simple interface. As you can see, I could go ahead and create a report. I could say I attended a trade show. I could create this report for myself or on the behalf of someone else if I am set up as a delegate for them. And I could start putting in some various fields, such as begin dates and end dates for whatever the travel period was or my reimbursement time frame. So I could say I did a trade show. Now that they are back on. And then I have the ability to start doing coding. All of our coding is configurable here, right? So if I want to put it to a different company, if I have a multiple company set up, if I'm managing different locations, I can most certainly put those in there as configuration such that they show as drop downs in the interface. And then of course, I'm going to create this report. And when I create this report, I have the ability to add different items. So I could add, and we'll go through each of them. I could add an expense item. Expense items represent those things that are incurred out of pocket. So I could say I did a team dinner. And again, begin selecting the coding, the things that matter to me for maybe dimension assignment or account assignment, depending on your ERP. Depending on what I pick here, you're going to see different fields pop up. So we have a user-defined capability such that I could capture different information based on the user's selection of such things as expense types. If you're doing a business in Canada, maybe GST is applicable, as well as putting in the amount and then adding an attachment. Attachments can come directly from my PC or from a SharePoint library that I submitted via my mobile phone, and I'll share my phone and show you how I could do that. In any regard, I'm going to go ahead and add this expense. So this is just representing something that's going to be payable to the employee. In other words, they incurred this expense either in cash or on a personal credit card, and I need to pay them back. Other types of reimbursement, maybe I travel and I want to give people mileage reimbursement for their travel. So again, you can see I could sort of fill this out manually or maybe use a Google Map integration to say I went from the airport to maybe my conference here is at Disneyland. So we're going to go ahead and put that in, calculate the distance, and then go ahead and accept it. And as you can see, it auto-populated the reimbursement mileage for me, as well as the configuration calculated the reimbursement amount, as well as defaulted the expense type to mileage. And then last but not least, we have credit card transactions. Credit card transactions are received from a feed, right? And we use a service to hook up to different credit card providers. So here we have transactions that have come in via my corporate credit card that have obviously are going to be paid by the company, but maybe I need to include these to my report for the sake of substantiating them by either adding more attachments or putting a cost center or things like that that may be applicable to code these such that I don't have to manually do it later. So we'll go ahead and say this is for hotel. And again, we'll add that right to the report. So now that I have all these items added, I could of course save this for later. At the point that I want to kick off a workflow for it, I'm going to go ahead and hit the submit button. So that was one option, right? Again, using a web-based interface, I could have done that on a mobile phone as well, but mobile phones, generally speaking, I want to keep it simpler than that. That's too many options for someone to pick on a mobile phone. So let's start looking at mobile phone examples. And I am going to share my phone here. We're all going to keep our fingers crossed that I don't get any embarrassing text or anything as I'm doing this. And we are going to look at some of the power of the Office 365 tools that I could use to capture these expense receipts. And again, whether or not you're using our app or not, these of course are all available to you. So again, starting off simple, we're going to open up a OneDrive app. And OneDrive, if you are very familiar with it, is highly integrated with SharePoint sites. So maybe I want to give my ability for someone to take a picture of a receipt. So I'm going to go ahead and snap a picture of it. And just simply upload it. And what this is going to kick off in the background is an OCR process that's going to receive this receipt again into that library. So if I were to show you that incoming library, so if I go to the right one, you're going to see my new scan that I just received a couple seconds ago here. And if we're patient, we're going to see these columns start populating themselves from an OCR process that I kick off when this expense comes in. And if this is integrated with our application, this is just another way to get items onto that report. So these will automatically be added to the report and coded for me using the results of OCR. As you can see, OCR is going to pick up the category, it's going to pick up the vendor, it's going to pick up the amount. So everything that I was doing manually, I don't need to do anymore because it's now going to be propagated from an OCR process. So that's the quote unquote simple method, right? Let's get a little bit more sophisticated. And again, you know, which one of these sort of applies to you depends on what it is that you're trying to manage. So I'm going to open up a Power, oops, wrong app. I'm sorry, not Power Automate. I want to open up Power Apps. And I'm going to go to our expense app that we've created. And you can see it's right here. And you're going to see this is very similar in nature to the web-based interface, right? I could capture expenses, I could capture auto items, I could capture credit card items. All of these are going to flow in very similar fashion. So I could say I went out to lunch again, silver, green. Maybe do some categorization on it this way because I don't want to rely on OCR, or maybe OCR is not going to be helpful for the categories that I want to assign, such things as like cost centers and stuff like that. And again, I'm going to take a picture. So I'll take a photo. This time I'll grab another receipt. And again, this is going to go to that same library, right? Everything that we're doing here is going to the same library, which is ultimately adding itself to an expense report through our application. And we'll see that in a second. But it's just a little bit different of an interface. It's using a mobile phone. As you can see, I'm not asking a lot of questions. It's sort of simple. I'm giving them the ability to code the various things, etc. And I could do that same thing with credit auto items too. The difference between credit card items is credit card items, I don't want anyone to enter, right? These are going to come from a feed. So as opposed to them entering it from scratch, maybe I just want them to edit it such that they could, you know, put the category of what this expense was, or again, take a picture of whatever the end expense receipt was and include that such that I have that to substantiate the credit card expense. So different options. Through the years, you know, we've obviously talked to a lot of companies, and some people say, hey, all I really care about is credit card transactions, or all I really care about is mileage reimbursement. So to simplify that process, we've created different apps, again, using the Power App framework. So maybe I just want to do credit card transactions. My credit card transaction app keeps it pretty simple. Now all I see is the credit card transactions coming through a feed, right? Again, right from the bank. So these are replicated daily. And I have all these transactions that are coming from that feed that, again, just need a little bit more coding. And in this case, we're going to do job coding. So you can see I could include this to jobs or tasks or things like that, and then go ahead and submit that directly from the mobile app. So simple, same idea, but again, just trying to keep it as easy as possible for the employees who are capturing that. And then again, I could add more jobs if I need to allocate it to different jobs and do things like that. So definitely different options as far as how I want to allocate this expense. So it looks like I already allocated $12. So we're going to go ahead and allocate the additional, if I could do math, 27, right? So we'll go ahead and do 27 and allocate that to a job as well. And then submit it. Oop. So as you can see, that's just another flavor. Or sometimes it's all about mileage, right? Cool things you could do with Power Apps. Power Apps can, given that they're on my phone, they know where I am. So I could manage my location with it. And if I click this simple depart, what it's going to do is kick off a workflow in the background, and it's going to use my phone's GPS settings to determine where I've been. And unfortunately, I'm just sitting at my desk here, so I'm not going to go far. But if I say arrived, it's going to use my GPS location and come back with the distance that I traveled, and again, add that to a report for reimbursement. So I didn't go very far. As I mentioned, I'm just sitting here. But if I was traveling in a car, I could use that to absolutely capture the distance that I traveled and therefore automatically calculate the reimbursement for the employee. In this particular app, we have other ones that is all it is, mileage in the depart and arrival. But in this case, I've also added this simple ability to add an out-of-pocket expense too. So again, ability to take a picture, categorize it, and then submit it. If all I cared about was the mileage, here's even an app that's very simple. It's just the depart and arrived. So all it's using is the GPS, because for this particular customer, that was their main source of expenses being incurred by employees. So now that I have all this data captured, and if I were again to open up the app, everything that I'm doing from my phone is adding itself to expense reports as expense line items. So if I were going to open up the report that I have here, which is going to be this guy here, I think is the credit card one that I created, you're going to see the various line items that are being automatically added to the report that are coming in via the phone. So that's my credit card report, as well as the out-of-pocket ones that I intended for the trade or incurred on the trade show. So regardless of how this data is coming in, either via app or from the mobile interface, of course, I may want to initiate a workflow on it. And that could be automatically submitted. So if I'm doing expenses, say on a monthly basis, I could automatically submit them. If it's more from a one-off basis, I could do it from my phone and submit it there, or I could submit it directly from the web interface. And this is moving on to that sort of second part of the process of the workflow. And the workflow, regardless of how I captured it, is going to leverage Power Automate to send me review tasks. So unfortunately for my demo, I have to be everyone here. I have to be the employee, I have to be accounting, I have to be the approver, but now I'm putting on my manager hat, or my reviewer hat, if you will. And you could see I've received a Power Automate task that I could approve or reject the report. I have some summary of the details here, but maybe I want to drill into that and look at the receipts that have been added, look at the coding, drill into the line items, etc. So again, I could sort of see all aspects of the report here. You'll also see that I have the ability to look at the audit, and the audit is tracking each step in this workflow process. So as I'm submitting it, as reviewers are, pending their review, it's going to track who that is. And obviously I could do things like workflow escalations and notifications if they choose not to approve this in a timely fashion. So the other cool thing with these approval tasks, I showed you I could access it via email, but all of these tasks in the world of Power Automate are also integrated with Microsoft Teams. So if I were to open up Teams here, you are going to see that same task come in via my activity feed. So if I was just living in Teams, there's no need to go to my email or anywhere else. And if I were to open up my activity feed, you'd see there's that same request. Again, ability to drill back to it, approve or reject it, and in this case, I actually enabled reassignment capabilities. If Teams is too much for me, and again, I'm maybe more of the road warrior type, and I just want to do this all from my phone, you probably figured it out. I have a mobile app for Power Automate installed. And this is pretty cool because I could look at all those approval tasks that are assigned to me and review and approve them directly from my phone. Again, the ability to approve or reject, as well as add comments, etc. So even with the approval, I have a lot of different options on how I want to manage these expenses. You can see I did receive a notification there going back to the requester that it has been approved. That wasn't enough options already. They do give us an app that you could add to Teams, as opposed to waiting for those notifications to come in from my activity feed. I could look at the full list of them here and their status on whether or not they've been approved or requested, when it was created, and who submitted the expense report. All different options, doesn't matter which one you pick. When I complete this, it will update all of those. It'll update my mobile phone, it'll update Teams, and that task will no longer be actionable because I'm going to go ahead and complete it. Doesn't matter which way I do it. So moving on past the workflow, then we get into the world of the integration. Well, I guess one comment about the workflow, right? The workflow, obviously, I could have a lot of different steps for. For the sake of simplicity on this demo, I only have a single step. So it's immediately approved, and then we call the integration with the ERP after that final step in the approval. So if I were to do a little filtering here and apply this, you could see I have reports that have gone into this approved complete status. And what that means is that they have integrated with an ERP application. And again, depending on the type of expense that I'm incurring, determines whether or not these are reimbursable expenses, AKA I want to pay the employee. And that could either be through a payroll system or directly through accounts payable if I have them set up as vendors, or what we would consider a non-reimbursable expense like a corporate credit card. In this case, it's going to create a journal entry to reflect the expense, but it's not going to pay the employee. Other things I could see from this dashboard, that was drilling into the report, but if I want to look at the reviewer's notes and what they put, so that was the person who reviewed it, it's obviously being captured. And if I want to look at the full audit log of each step in the workflow, what happened, who submitted it, whether or not they approved or rejected it, and then finally that it was integrated with an ERP transaction. And that brings us to this last tab here where we show those ERP details. So we integrate with several different ERP applications, which could all be available on our integration page. So if you click integration from our website, it will show you that if I were to click on this here, this is going to go into actually Dynamics GP, and then this is the transaction that got created upon integration. So, walking through that workflow, that final step there, we're going to create some type of transaction, whether it be a payable or a journal entry, reflecting either the credit card or an out-of-pocket expense. So now that I have all this data in this system, the last part of this sort of equation is what do I do with it, or how do I look at it, or how can I analyze it? And, we could do a lot of things for there, right? Power BI has some pretty graphical capabilities, so we could create Power BI reports, given that it's all stored here. So here's just some sample reports from a dashboard perspective. All of the data in its raw format is being stored in that SharePoint repository. So if I were to click on this actual link, I know this isn't pretty, but you can see all the data is not leaving your system. It's all sitting here in its various state. So I could start doing Power Query, which is another Excel add-in that allows me to look at this information, sort things by their status. Maybe I'm only concerned with things that are under review, and begin, analyzing these expenses, or maybe building pivot tables and graphs and things like that. So a lot of different options. Again, I would not be over concerned with the ones that don't apply to you. The ones that do apply to you, of course, are the ones that are going to help you from an automation perspective. So if I were to go back to my summary here, what we're trying to do here is, again, leverage what you already own, right? So if I look at the various building blocks, if you will, we had an integration, ERP integration, we have a receipt repository and a place to capture these expenses. We're performing OCR as well as workflow. And the beauty about this framework is most all of those are things that are already included with your subscription. So you can see our app is being added to this mix over here. Really, I am leveraging this framework to do these various things and leverage what I've already purchased. And that gives me a ton of capability as far as configuration, especially when things like come up with the workflow. Microsoft Power Automate, otherwise known as Flow, is very configurable as far as what I could do from a workflow and escalation, as well as reminders and things like that. So I touched on a few of those, but there is a heck of a lot of capability there that, of course, I don't have time to cover today. So that took us through the various steps. I will, I guess, turn it over to you, Crystal, to see if there's any questions, or if anyone wanted to see anything different or additional, or me to dive into any further information. I am happy to do so.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. That was a great presentation today.
No problem.
So yeah, we will open it up to some questions. I did see that Christopher put a comment in there saying, how does it get fed from Amex? And is it possible to segment the data pull to the card user?
Good question. So the feed that we use is a fairly, again, I will open it up to you just so you are aware. So there is this product by the name of Plaid, and Plaid gives us connections to various financial institutions. So of course we don't have to build it. So this is something that we've integrated with our product, and if I were to click on this or one of these, you would see, the list of the financial institutions. That's not it. Plaid financial institution. There we go. Maybe that's right. Well, somewhere on their website, I'm having a hard time finding it now. They put, well, all right. Maybe this is it. Maybe I'll get lucky in the third time. The various banks that they've integrated with. See a full list. Well, I tried to find their website, but somewhere on their website, of which unfortunately I don't have that link handy, sorry about that, they show the list of institutions that they integrate with, and it's quite extensive. So what that does is receives those feed, like you saw, and we parse it. And we parse it based on a translation table of that card to the card holder. And those then come into this list and are sitting there waiting for me to translate them. So if I were to show you that raw data, this list here is being populated by that feed. And as it comes in, it gets coded to an employee because we have a mapping of the last 4 digits of that credit card to who that card was issued to. So that feed is a nightly feed. It comes in, it takes that data using the Power Automate workflow, calling that Plaid API, and then translates it to a different employee. So now it is in there, and as you can see, I have a status associated to each of these on whether or not an employee has coded this to the report. So now that I have all this data and I could tell whether or not they've coded it to report, I could start doing alerts and workflows on this list, right? So I could start building alerts using the standard SharePoint functionality to maybe remind people that they have a transaction and they haven't done anything with it yet. So I could build a simple alert based off of this list such that it sends out a reminder. But good question.
That was a great one. I know we had one submitted to us earlier. Where is all the data stored, Mike?
Yeah, all of the data is stored in your Office 365 tenant. So I had that raw list here. This isn't the pretty view of it, but this is basically the database between all that data. So as I mentioned on my slide here, what SharePoint is, not that one, what SharePoint is providing to this picture is the repository. Here we go. Oops. So if I go back here, all of that data is stored here, right? So whether or not it's coming in from a Power App, whether or not it's coming in from a credit card feed, whether or not it's coming in for a form, whether or not it's coming in from our app, SharePoint is serving as that repository for your data, as well as managing the status and things like that. So that's where all the assignments to such things as cost centers and expense types is occurring.
Okay. It looks like Christopher had a little bit of a follow-up to his original question. He's just making sure that the description characters can be limited to 100 because of BC's limit.
Ooh, good question. So yes, BC does have a limit, right? So when it comes to the descriptions, generally speaking, people want descriptions maybe not only for the report, but for the line item. And regardless of where those are being collected, if they're from the Power App, of course, we want to respect the limits of wherever that field is being integrated with. So we would restrict the length on the Power App. If it's coming from our app, we of course know. If it's coming from OCR, then we can most certainly concatenate our, that's not the word I'm looking for, not concatenate, but shrink that to make sure that it's going into the source. The other thing we do is if we're creating a transaction, say in BC, there is that link capability such that if there is not enough room or home in the ERP to put all that information, we could provide a link there such that they could drill back to that report. So there's different, sort of ways around that limitation, and the links is most certainly one of them, because maybe I don't want to pass all the receipts and the attachments and things like that to Business Central. I just want to pass a link so someone could drill back.
Good question.
Yeah.
I do have another one here. What licenses are required for this solution to work?
Good question. So if you were to look, again, I will hopefully get better results on my searching here. And you were just to type in let's just go to Google really quick. And if you were to type in Office 365 Enterprise Licensing Plans, if I have some better luck here, you will see a fancy grid of what's included. So most of our customers are on Office 365 and Enterprise Plan, one of these. And it really doesn't, quote unquote, matter which one you're on because of all of the tools that we're using, Teams, SharePoint is here. As you can see, all those boxes are checked, as well as Power Automate, et cetera, right? So there's Power Automate. So generally speaking, if you have a Office 365 enterprise plan, you're getting all of these tools already. They already come with your subscription. I know there's probably 1,000 different ways to buy Office 365, so I don't want to say, quote unquote, every plan out there includes those things because that's probably not a true statement, but the most common ones seem to be the enterprise plans. As you can see, they're cheap and they include all these tools. So really, chances are is you probably have it all already.
Perfect. I know Christopher's typing another one, but I've got one in the meantime. I'm like, it's always great when there's participation. Everybody's happy. How does your solution securely connect to my ERP application?
Ooh, okay. So in the world of ERP applications, that's a hard question because as we know, there are a lot of them out there. So let's just talk about, we'll start with Business Central. And for the sake of comparison on this one, Business Central, if I were to open that up, has built-in web services. And if I were to load this page, and if it could take me here to the web services, get rid of that, type in web services. What you will see is the data that we're interacting with, right? Such as the ability to create a journal entry or create a purchase invoice has all been published. And Business Central natively gives us a URL that we then put back in our app to connect to the business logic directly on that page. So somewhere in this list, I have a purchase invoice such that I could create that purchase invoice when everything is done. There it is. So that's the URL that gets configured. If you're using an on-premise ERP, those are probably not public like in the world of Business Central. And what Microsoft gives us for doing this is something called a Azure Hybrid Connection. And what this allows us to do is our app is based on an Azure app service. And you could use this as a relay to connect to data that exists on an on-premise ERP. So if you're using the old Nav or GP or anything else, you don't have to quote unquote expose all those to the open world. You could connect to them securely using this Azure Hybrid Connection, which then gives our app the ability to confirm that the employee exists as a vendor, to validate the accounts, to create journal entries and payable transactions, but not require anyone to make anything public, and obviously open to vulnerabilities by publishing it on the internet.
Awesome. Okay, so here's another one for you. How does roll up to the CC bill as a vendor? Does the transaction show up as a GL detail?
Transactions show up as a GL detail. So I'm assuming that's applying more to the credit card world, right? Because, well, I take that back. If you're paying your employees through a payroll service, you probably want a GL integration as well, or I should say that's a more common one. If you're processing a credit card transaction, you probably want that integrated with the journal entry as well. And those are being managed, generally speaking, by creating obviously a two-sided journal entry, like every journal entry in this world, one to the expense, right? So if it's going to, meals and entertainment or hotel or whatever, and then the offset of that is usually like a reconciliation account, like a credit card payable account. So then when my credit card bill comes in, I have all of these transactions hitting or holding against a temporary reconciliation account that then I could use to reconcile that with my statement. So then when I paid a credit card vendor, of course, I'm offsetting that credit card payable account and then reflecting that, of course, to AP or cash, I guess, because I've already incurred it because it's a credit card. So generally speaking, that GL detail gives you the line items that you need such that when that bill comes in, I have something to reconcile that to in my journal entry transactions.
Wonderful. Well, I think we can start wrapping up. I don't see any more questions coming in the chat. So
okay.
Using the raise hand function, which anyone can access, if you look up at the top of your Teams browser, you'll see that little smiley guy with his hand up like he's giving you a nice high five. If you'd like to click on that, how many of you would like to receive more information regarding this product? Oh, I'm seeing the thumbs up. Loving it.
Okay.
There we go. Oh, I see some more. Thanks, Trisha. That's great. So thank you, Mike, for taking the time out of your day and sharing all of this with everyone. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you to you too. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's perfect. So it looks like if that's all the questions that we have today, if anything else comes up and you want some more information about the EasyEXP365 and how it can help you, or if you'd like to book a meeting or do a one-on-one demo, you can visit the sabrelimited.com website, which I will post in our little chat down here, or my contact information is on the screen. Thank you everyone for attending, and I hope you have a great day. And thank you again, Mike, for this informative presentation.
No problem. Thank you for allowing us to host or participate, or thank you for hosting, and thank you everyone for your time as well. And have a great day.